All right, what's good, y'all? I'm back. Two good videos, back in a row. Today I'm going to be talking about black Tarzan stories, right? No, not Tarzan. Black Conan stories. What I call black Conan stories are what some people also call as sword and soul, sword and sorcery. That's the mainstream. The black people came up with sword and soul, and I like all of those. However, I'm dealing with black fantasy, right? So it's not paranormal. It's not necessarily ghosts and vampires and werewolves, although they can fall into it. It's the subgenre of fantasy, where you're dealing with, think of Lord of the Rings, of course. Think of Conan, where it's hyper-realism, right? Conan is fighting snakes bigger than, a tree, okay? That's not real, but in the fantastic world, it is. Some people argue that the whole genre of science fiction should be called fantastic. You understand? Because it is a non-realistic thing. Some people argue that science fiction should be called speculative fiction. And I agree with all of those. However, I do think that there's subcategories, and one of them is fantasy. There's sword and soul, there's sword and sorcery. Because when you mention it, you know what, when you describe it, you understand the parameters that these films have in common. You're not dealing with post-apocalypse. You're not dealing with spies, secret agents. You're not dealing with, what's another? Vampires, werewolves, which is horror. You're not dealing with a cyberpunk future, right? Technology. You're dealing with sword and sorcery, soul and sorcery and swords. And I have a story called the Planet Akibulan, and it made me think of this because this was a genre that I used to, and I still do, call black Conan stories, because excuse me, my Planet Akibulan is definitely a black Conan story. But what I used to say about him was, it was hard to enjoy him because it's really just big black empires fighting other big black empires in ways that black empires didn't always fight. And almost you have to make them, you're trying to keep up with Lord of the Rings, you're trying to keep up with Game of Thrones. And, I haven't seen African civilizations be that nasty, be that deceitful. Like even in David Anthony Durham's book, Acacia, they're acting uncharacteristically negative for it to be empires of color. And so if you look in African empires, they've done some nasty, dastardly things, no doubt, just like black serial killers do here in the States. But the big but is, how nasty do they get? And then what's the frequency of nastiness? Some of these are just so nasty. I mean, you're dealing with the Game of Thrones, where there's not even a decent person in the damn story. You understand? That's not an African kingdom. I'm reading Children of Blood and Bone sequel, Children of Sorcery and Vengeance, right? Or Children of Vengeance and Sorcery. And even in that, they have evil people, but there's decency amongst the people, right? So I am a Pan-Africanist. I am a person who has like some of my friends say, a romantic relationship with Africa, right? And its people. And I have no problem with that, okay? I own it, but I also challenge you to prove me wrong, okay? So that was my gripe with many of the sword and sorcery and, black version is sword and soul. So even black stories like Acacia that haven't really embraced sword and soul and call themselves sword and sorcery, still, I'm still talking about them, right? And I have my AC on, and I'm still sweating. Go Florida, right? It's better than winters. How about that? Better than black ice on the road. Anyway, I still feel that black science fiction's version and sub rename, because we did spy funk, we did cyber funk, and then we did sword and sorcery, right? I mean sword and soul. I still think it's fine, but even with in all of those stories, it just felt a lot of black on black violence, and I didn't like it. So when I was approached to write, and I think that was my apprehension in writing a fantasy story, Black Conan story, a Sword and Soul story. I think that's what was that drew me back, right? I was looking for a story, right? And I didn't want to just have black people fighting European countries. It just seemed too cliche, So I wanted to do something that spoke to fantasy, that spoke to blackness or Africanness, and that wasn't, so cliche that it's just black people fighting white people. That works. I mean, and then I'll probably write a story like that, but I didn't want to do that. So I took inspiration from Thundarr the Barbarian, which is another fantasy cartoon, John Carter, and of course Conan. I pulled out all my old Conan comic books, and I'm like, I'm reading these because I want to get a feel for it. And it seems like I'm going to be making a new mythology, because I don't want to misinterpret actual African religions, although I'm going to take inspiration from them. I created a world very much like Star Wars, in the sense that Star Wars takes place in outer space, but they're also clear in telling you that it's a long, long time ago. And I want to, and that way, it's problematic because they speak in ways that we speak here. But I wanted to kind of get away from fully modern colloquialisms. I didn't want it to be a post or civilization doomsday world, which Thundarr the Barbarian is. It takes place after the earth is destroyed and magic surfaces. I didn't want to do that. And I didn't want to kind of rewrite African history in a brutal way. You know what I'm saying? I'm a romanticist. I don't mind that there was violence, but I don't want to make it seem as harsh as I would have to make it to be enjoyable, right? Because I want a brutal story, right? I want Game of Thrones. I want Lord of the Rings. You know what I'm saying? I want death, domination, and destruction, and that's just not an African history, right? You have violence. I ain't saying they're perfect. They didn't, talk it out. But you didn't have great creations of destruction. You know what I'm saying? So I want to be able to have that. So I created a world called Planet Ikibulan, which is a name that they used to call Africa very early on. And so I do have that. I have two characters, three main characters, Shimbaka, Kuhela, and Bebot is the robot. And they are my main characters that I'm focusing on. But what I've done is Planet of the Ikibulan is very much like, if you think of in the Marvel Universe, if you try to understand the Marvel Universe, there's something that came before Thanos, right? They're going to get to it in the next movie. But if you look into the comic books, and you probably have to go online to see one of these nerd talk shows or these nerd vlogs, they have something that produced life, right? So that comes from religious theology. In my community, the hip-hop community, we had groups called the 5 Percenters, and they always talked about triple darkness. Yakub grafted the world in triple darkness. And I'm not a 5 Percenter, so I don't claim to know the exact terminology, because them God community, 5% community will come after you. So I'm just going to say I've been influenced slightly by them, but we do have it. So what Planet Ikibulan is a planet the size of our sun that gives life to all life in the universe. So all life starts there. So you think about it as a stem cell, right? A stem cell that through dimensions, right? You think about Pacific Rim, you think about Godzilla, you think about Kong of Skull Island. You had these little portholes that come through the hollow earth, right? What if these portholes connected to somewhere? This is what planet Akibulan is. So life, human life, I mean not human life, all life forms get their start. Animals, plants, human, get their start on planet Akibulan, and then they get dispersed through these portholes. So on my story, there's something that keeps planet Akibulan hidden from all these other, from detection, right? From space travelers, because, you know, life forms learn how to travel through space, probably not just humans, right? But none of them can find planet Akibulan. Something happens where planet Akibulan becomes visible. And this occurrence that causes it to become visible now also allows people to see the planet, and it starts getting visitors, right? And so it also creates an opportunity for the planet to defend itself. And how does it defend itself? Very much like the human body. It creates antibodies. So these antibodies, like not T cells, what's the cancer cells, right? I forgot what the name of the cancer cell is. But like cancer cells, if unchecked, if unregulated, they can kill the body. So planet Akibulan becomes threatened by its own ability to create, and its regulator gets out, gets unregulated. It's probably for the better terminology. And so therefore I have these life forms, human life forms, Shabaka and Koela, running through planet Akibulan trying to restore order and trying to get these warrior white blood cell life forms that manifest in giants, Godzillas, zombies, right? Whatever it is. I'm going into prehistoric animals that we don't have anymore. Like I have a really cool post on a 16-foot crocodile that walks like a horse. That is crazy, but we had those. So I'm going to have animals like that. You know, I'm down to go in the lines of Alien or Predator. I'm going over because all life comes from this planet. So now that becomes my beautiful African fantasy, my beautiful Sword and Soul, my beautiful Black Conan, right? So that's how I'm achieving it. And I just really wanted to talk about it. I mean, this is a PR, but it's also a conversation about, you know, how I evolved into writing Sword and Soul. It's not something that I didn't like. It's just that I didn't want to read black people killing other black people on that scale in a place that I held high. Now I have, you know, pre-African theology present on planet Akibulan. So even if it becomes perfected in the ways of the Egyptians, here it is even on some other level, whether it's better or worse, it's the testing ground. It's the petri dish that germinates all of the other languages, theologies, and life forms. Everything comes from here. And it's so big that it's variations all around it. So I guess I haven't determined at what point do life forms start getting disseminated, dispersed. I don't know. What level of maturity do they have to be at before they get their own planet? Do they have to petition for it? That might be an interesting concept. And that's it. So, or if they become a threat to somebody else, does the council, if there is a council, right? I don't know yet. These are good world building things. Decide that this life form needs to be dispersed. So anyway, this is a little conversation of mine for you. Enjoy and carry on. If you do like it, I mean, if you do like it, right, like and subscribe, because I need more subscribers. I don't have that many. All right. Talk to you later. Peace.